You're going to see me in rare form today because something has irked me a little bit, and I do have some things to say about it. But first, I'm going to answer some of your questions. Hey everybody, welcome to Coffee and Trains. My name's Jimmy. I'm drinking some Tim Hortons today. If you want to check out some of my viewers, what they are drinking right here, if you want to leave what coffee you are drinking, you can put that in the comments below. Okay, so I do have something that irked me a little bit, and I'm going to talk about that later. But first, I do want to answer some of your questions. So John Batista said, if he had an HO scale layout, what would be the first locomotive and rolling stock that he would buy? Well, it really depends. This is kind of a wide open question. If you're talking about your very first thing, you really just need to kind of buy what you like and you'll figure out more of specifically what you want. So look at what is visually appealing and within your budget. If DCC is in your budget, I recommend going ahead and jumping in full, like head first into DCC. If not, DC is totally fine. You can buy DCC ready locomotives so that you can be ready down the road. But I always recommend if you're just starting out and you don't have anything and you're just really getting into it, look at some of the more budget tiers like Walther's Train Line and things like that. Those are things that are going to be really good for your budget. Atlas has a good budget line. Walther's has a good budget line. Athearn has a good budget line. You can check out some of those. You're not going to get as many of like the different numbered series of cars or things like that or sets of cars, but you're going to get some very budget-friendly options. And for locomotives, if you're looking for budget-friendly, Bachmann is great, especially for DCC and relatively budget-friendly, but Walther's is great too if you're looking at DCC ready, as well as Atlas is getting a little bit up there, but overall, I would look at something, just look at what you like before you figure out exactly what you want to do. Sam Dickerson says he's never officially built a model railroad before, but he's helped other people work on theirs and have a better understanding than most beginners. So should he start something as simple as a layout like MRR1, which is a project railroad that I built? I'll put the playlist for that at the end of this video. Or should he try a stand at something a little bit more complex for his first layout? So for most people, I'm saying just go with what you know, go with what you feel like you can do. Don't overdo it for your first layout. But if you do have a little bit of experience, you'll kind of know what you can and can't do. So maybe MRR1 is a little bit basic for you and you want to build something a bit more complex. So it's really all depends on your skill level. I'd say if you're slightly more advanced in track, you can really go for something a bit more advanced than MRR1. If you feel a little bit unsure about your track work and laying track, I would stick with something relatively simple. It doesn't have to be the plan from MRR1, but you can definitely just stick with something simple. I think really when you're talking about building your first layout, it's really what you're comfortable with doing with the track, because that is ultimately what's going to give you your fun factor, because that's what's going to let trains run. RP Lauer asked if I have ever worked with water on one of your layouts. I'm not talking about something minor like a pool or small pond, but like a lake, river, and or waterfall. From what he can tell, he says that glue, epoxy, and resin seem to be the two most common materials to use, and is wondering if I had a preference. Well, I've only done water, like a body of water once, and that was really just, it was a pond that kind of was like feeding into a lake, you know, like a pond that's like a stormwater runoff pond, and I used 2-part epoxy for that, and that's great, but it's also can be a little bit more difficult to do that. Woodland Scenics makes some great products for making water. Another little trick, if you can also get a piece of plexiglass and slide it in. One really cool thing I've seen done is someone actually took some of the uneven plexiglass. It's kind of like got like the uneven texture that's like for like a shower door or something like that, and they actually slid that in to make their river with just a little bit of choppiness. So another thing you can do is also you can take Mod Podge and do some work with an empty airbrush and just kind of blowing it around to get ripples and waves and things like that. There's a lot of different things, but I've only done it with epoxy, so that's my only one that I have done. And I would say, like, if you're not that experienced, check out Woodland Scenics products, because that's probably going to be your best bet in terms of ease of use. Iron Horse Model Trains asks about Arduinos. He says, what is your recommendation for adding power for a layout if you're using an Elegoo Mega? Now, Elegoo is a company that makes Arduino clones among a lot of other things, including 3D printers. And basically, Arduinos are open source, and there's a lot of different types of Arduinos. So Elegoo makes one, they make Unos, they make Megas. They're one of my favorite Arduino clone companies, and I highly recommend them. If you're looking to power them, a Mega can be used as part of a Wi-Fi DCC++EX setup. It can also be used as part of a regular DCC++ setup. You can also use them to control a motor driver. If you're doing DC, the Elegoo is not gonna, the Mega is not itself going to power the layout. And even in DCC++, the Elegoo itself doesn't power the layout. It basically gets the code and tells a motor driver what to do. When you're looking at DCC++ and DCC++EX, it's telling the motor drivers on the Motorshield that you put on what signals to send. If you're doing it in a standard DC and you're using something just like a motor driver of some kind just to send power to the layout, it's just simply telling that motor driver what to do. So if you're doing DCC++, or if you're doing DCC, just do DCC++ or one of the DCC++EX setups for it. That's going to be the easiest way to do it. And if you're doing standard DC, if you are powering your track, you're going to be just use something like a motor driver. That's going to be just very similar to what a DC power pack is going to do. Oakley Skidmore says, wouldn't the garden railroad I built this summer actually be MRR2 and the one that I'm building now be MRR3? Well, I guess you could see it that way. I really like doing the MRR series as kind of these instructional videos on what to do, and I envision MRR1 as the one that is the one that's like, if you need to build a layout, you don't have a ton of space, and you want to build something that's fun, you can do that, and that's MRR1. And then the Garden Railroad was really just like, hey, I'm going to build this, check it out. And MRR2 is like, okay, you want to do something that's a little bit different, a little advanced. Maybe you have a shelf that you can do something on, and I wanted to do a different scale. And I also wanted to show some more detailed things. Like I wanted to show doing cork road bed versus the Kato Unitrack that I've used. I wanted to show the tortoise switch motors. I've got quite a few things that I want to show with MRR2 that you can do with in-scale, but are simply easier to show with a camera on HO scale. So that's what the MRR series are more instructional series, and the Garden Railroad was just like, hey, check it out, I'm building this. Ian Narita says, your HO Railroad, any specific era, or will you just go with it? So I'm not going ultra modern. I bought a couple of locomotives for it. They're EMDs. I kind of just bought whatever was on sale because I am on a budget, but I'm just going to be kind of building what looks right. I'm not really going for a specific era. Just going to be doing some nice detailing. I'm going to keep it relatively the same, especially the buildings. I don't want to have like a very modern building next to a really old building, and I'm not going to be running old rolling stock next to like brand spanking new rolling stock and things like that. But I'm not really going to be strict on an era, and I'm not going to name an era. I'm just going to really make it look nice and go for some realism. Okay, so this is probably the part that you all clicked on the video for, and yeah, I've got a bit of a rant, so brace yourself. In case you don't know, I'm building an HO scale switching layout. I've literally just talked a bunch about it, MRR2. Now, I am primarily an N-scaler. That's an N-scale layout. But I have built in every major scale while in this hobby. The only ones left that I really want to tackle are Z-scale and S-scale. Now, I had a comment a while back that the person deleted, but it was a long rant. And one of the topics that it hit on in its meandering critique of my channel, seriously, it went everywhere, was it thought that they thought I was an N-scaler only, that I didn't do anything else with any other scales. Well, who gave you that idea? I'm a model railroader. I like all model trains. I don't go to train shows and scoff at the scales that aren't mine. I literally love watching model trains of all shapes and sizes. I haven't ran 3-rail O-scale since high school, but I love watching RBP trains. Loving the bridge construction, by the way. It's looking good. I'm modeling the modern era right now on this layout, but it doesn't mean that I don't love seeing turn of the century or transition era layouts. I love all model trains, and the modelers behind them are awesome. Yes, the exceptional modelers and layouts should be celebrated because it's amazing work, but that doesn't mean we should tear down those who don't necessarily meet our standards of being worthy of praise. Everyone is different, and everyone has a different view of good and successful. This is why I showcase layouts of all different skill levels on my virtual model railroad show. Somewhere along the line, we got the idea in our head that just because something or someone isn't the best, it's the worst and we have to tear them down. Well, not here. I promise you that I will always be a place of having fun and learning about model trains. Now, I'm not immune from negative or hurtful comments about me. It just comes with the territory of putting yourself out there on YouTube. And frankly, they make me laugh, and that's about all. And I don't really care. But I will tell you that if you make negative or hurtful comments about one of my viewers or subscribers, I do care about that and them. So you may find yourself banned. I don't play when it comes to that. I don't engage. I just delete comments and block users. I say all of this to make the point that model railroading is a wholesome, family-friendly hobby that should be fun for all. I'm going to keep doing my best to keep it that way, and you should too. Oh, and by the way, this series on my channel that comes out Thursdays, it's called Coffee and Trains, so I'm always going to talk about coffee in it too. So there you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, stay safe, be kind, drink some coffee, and happy railroading.